We're recording.
All right. Welcome back, SolidWorks nerds, fellow SolidWorks nerds, I should say. It's Brandon Adkins, back with my partner in crime, Garrett Klein. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing well.
Here we get to talk about everybody's favorite topic today, right?
What's that? What are we going to talk about today?
The toolbox.
The toolbox. People's favorite thing that they love to hate.
Mm-hmm. Somebody once told me, they basically said that the toolbox equals full box. I'm like, no, no. That's not right.
I've heard a few things pretty similar to that for sure. But I think where that all stems from is people have run into an issue before and maybe not understood why they run into an issue. And oftentimes they'll just dump Toolbox. They'd rather go download their parts online somewhere from a vendor website, which is fine, but I'm a fan of the Toolbox because there's a lot of purpose-built tools in there, right?
Yeah, and I like that it actually has some best practices built into it. Like if you wanted to see threads, they're not like helically cut threads, right? They're like revolve cut threads, which makes a huge difference when you get into the details of how that's set up. And then you can also do a cosmetic thread, which is even better practice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Think about the performance advantages. Yeah, I've seen so many of those downloaded parts that have all the fully featured threads on it, and it's just, they can be a time waster. Yeah, all the details there, but do you really need it? Best practice tells me no.
Yeah, I think also that the toolbox is so integrated into SolidWorks itself that a lot of people don't even realize that things like interference detection, where you can just ignore toolbox fasteners.
Yeah,
there's a lot of things that are just built into the software that you don't even realize until you look at the small details, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Not only is it going to help you actually place those components a little easier, but they work themselves into other functionalities. That's a great example. Another one we're going to talk about is simulation. It's got some tools where it's going to look for those toolbox parts to help you out. So, well, why don't we get into maybe a couple of examples, and we'll kind of figure out how Toolbox is going to work for us.
Sounds good. So I did send you something. Did you get the file I sent you?
I did.
Awesome. I think this one, the reason I wanted to send you this was because this was my experience before I started working for a reseller and understood, did training and understood how the toolbox should actually be used. So let's see what you ended up with, Brandon.
All right. Oh, of course, my graphics issue is going to come back right now.
Got to update your graphics card, man. Got to have the right driver.
It's an issue specifically with this line of Dell machines. A lot of other people are having issues too. All right. So I opened up the assembly. Here we go.
It looked right in the preview. Ooh.
That's what I ended up seeing. I wasn't sure if you meant it for it to be that way, but I assume probably not. The preview looked a little better.
Yep, that is not what I had. Let me go ahead and show you what I had really quick.
Those tubes look a lot smaller, and got a bunch of gaps in between.
Maybe the tube size was right, but let's show you what I got. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
So it looks like the tubes and stuff, the sizes were right, but all of them, the mates and stuff were messed up.
Yeah.
And the lengths of the tubes weren't right. And
yeah, I see that now. Tube lengths are way different.
All this has to do with realistically configurations, the way that the components were added. I went in and I drag and drop the components in from the toolbox, and basically just change the lengths of them manually as opposed to actually going in and specifying the correct lengths and stuff. And we're also just not sharing a database, which is probably the biggest no-no with the way that, right now we're using Toolbox. So.
Yeah. But definitely something that would be a high potential for somebody to do, right? If they don't really know how to use those components, they'll just maybe toss them in and then change a couple dimensions, right? And
Yep.
that's what you did.
Yep, that's exactly what I did. And with something like this frame, honestly, like, so I alluded to it like kind of the last episode when we were talking, but this is something that really should be done in like weldments instead. So like
Oh,
I've got
absolutely.
like, let's see if I've got something that's like this. This is a single part. All of the frame components and stuff are built right into this single part. I could send you this, no risk of this thing blowing up on you, right?
Yep.
As well as doing things like if I had done the miters and stuff that I wanted to see, those would have been like difficult. Like a corner like this, at the assembly level, I would have had to add assembly level cut features or go back in and like do a save as of the parts and add features to those part files. And I can add this, change those corners however I want. Even better, I think, to me, is the ability to add in like a weld gap, right? If you needed to put a weld gap in there, you could specify like an 1/8" weld gap for that, right? And then like, how am I going to mate that if I was using individual components and stuff? It would just be a mating nightmare. So
Right. Exactly. So much that's built into weldments. I totally agree. Like the stuff is in Toolbox. You can use it, but it's so much easier to manage something like what you just showed there.
mm-hmm.
And if you send it to somebody, it's just features, right? We don't have to make sure that we've got the same Toolbox files and database is up to date and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and with weldments, it like actually copies the profiles and stuff that they become part of that feature. So that's really, really nice. So
good stuff.
yeah,
I like it. Well, the other thing that I like about Toolbox parts, you can just snap them right into an assembly, right? So if you're just going to go place in a bunch of nuts, bolts, screws, whatever,
mm-hmm.
they have automatic mate references that come with them, right? So they're already built in. Can you sort of build your own Toolbox files? Yeah, if you know how to make mate references, you could definitely set them up that way, but it's already done for me, so I'd rather not spend the hassle myself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good point to bring up. So not only is it going to mate the parts correctly, but it's also auto sizing too, right?
Yep.
So it'll kind of read what size hole it's in. It even looks to like the type of hole that you're trying to mate to. So it's reading a lot of information to hopefully give you the right size or at least close to it.
Yeah, I got actually a really good example of this that we could take a look at if I go ahead and show my screen again here. So I've got another part that we could take a look at. So like you're saying, it can actually read like the features and stuff, right? If you use the hole wizard, right, and you're specifying a specific like type of hardware to go in there, we could just go ahead and insert this into an assembly. Let's go ahead and add that so it's fixed at my origin here. Make sure that my toolbox is turned on. Right. And then if I just wanted to automatically like populate the fasteners that go on here, I could select a face, or I could do like an entire assembly if I wanted to. Hit like smart fasteners here, and it's going to interrogate that face and place the fastener types that I had with the right sizes, right? And I could come in and actually individually like kind of change the length of these components too if I wanted to.
Yeah.
All right.
So sweet.
Yeah,
Love
I can
the smart fasteners.
just save a ton of time. And like what you were saying, Brandon, with like the mate references too, man, that's huge, right? If you're not going to reuse like the features from like a lower level component, you just want to go down and find like a hex bolt or something. Maybe I had a through hole and I have something that's close to that. Just dragging and dropping, it should be able to read the geometry that I have, right? Auto size, right? We could change the length, right? It's just so quick. And you can do
Makes
that
for a
with
nice
all
way to
sorts of
just,
components. Go ahead.
oh yeah, definitely. Well, and the other thing, as you're changing those lengths and stuff, those just become configurations of that part file if you want it to be. Depends on how you configure your toolbox, but pretty easy to manage in my opinion.
Yeah, I think one of the other things, let me just add some more components here really quick. Let me get rid of this. I think a feature that probably a lot of people don't know about, and we'll talk a little bit about this here in a bit beyond, but if I have a bunch of components like this, right, and I want to select them for some reason, we do have the ability to like come up and say basically like select our toolbox parts, right? And then, you know, we could, if I were to make like a display state, been a little while since I've done one. Let's add a display state. So the other one would be, go ahead and rename that. Hardware. And then maybe this one I want to say no hardware. We could just come in and say select toolbox, hide. There we go. Now I have a display state with the hardware and display state without. Remember?
Very nice.
Yeah, it's just.
I probably don't use display states as much as I should.
Yeah, I think compared to like you don't really like compare them to configurations. They're part of configurations as well, but I think people use configurations where they should be using display states, like to like suppress and unsuppress features. With this, like all I want to do is like make the stuff go away or basically like not load, right? Because you can come in and you could say unload all the stuff that I have hidden, and now it's not bogging down my resources inside of SOLIDWORKS.
Yeah, just dump it out of memory and free up some resources, like you said. That plays pretty nicely into some of the advanced open options too, right? If you wanted to open a specific display state and not have it load the hidden components.
Yeah, I think at some point we should definitely talk about just simplification of like not only assemblies but parts as well. You'll notice like no matter where you go inside of SOLIDWORKS, there's always options for simplifying like your geometry or the number of components and stuff that you have.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, it's one of those things that really plays into that whole idea of simplification. Like hardware and fasteners, that kind of stuff really fits into that category. Yes, it needs to be there for completeness, but you don't need it all the time. It's a lot of extra detail. So that's probably a topic for another time, but we like to talk about practices for sure. What else do we got for Toolbox? There's some fun stuff.
What about simulation? How does it apply to simulation?
Yeah, that's a nice little segue, I think, that people often overlook. Like we said before, the Toolbox is going to help you to build those assemblies much quicker in a lot of cases, but it also helps you to do other things with a little bit more efficiency. So let me hop back over here.
I got the Mountain Dew Voltage today, by the way.
Oh, nice. Good choice.
Amping it up for you guys.
Not running out of caffeine this time.
No.
All right. So we got just kind of a simple little assembly here with a support bracket. We've got it screwed into this wall behind it, washers and nuts. And really what we want to do is bring something like this into simulation. We're going to put a load on it. Well, the nice thing about using those toolbox fasteners is they get the little toolbox flag on it, right? So it recognizes those files as something that came from the toolbox. If you do it that way, when I come over into a simulation study, if I'm just going to place a load on that split face that I've got up here to apply that force, the fasteners that are in that model really don't need to be there, right? I can represent those mathematically if I wanted to. There's tons of tools that are built into simulation for that.
Right.
So
and we wouldn't want to run this either the way that it is, because it would kind of treat those it all is like bonded, right? Like as if it was all welded together.
Yeah, right now the way I've got mine set up, I went through and actually edited my global interaction. So they're in contact right now. It's not going to try to bond it, but that is the default behavior. You're right. It would just basically glue everything together.
And that wouldn't be a very accurate simulation of that.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. So with fasteners like this, if you're going to use the connectors inside a simulation to create a bolt connection, what you can do is actually convert your toolbox fasteners to a bolted connection. So an easy way to do that, if you've already set up your simulation study, you can just come in here.
There it is. Yeah.
And change your toolbox fasteners to bolts. So it'll just kind of give you a little evaluation here. How many bolt connectors did it create? How long did it take? Now, even though you can see a preview of those fasteners, the actual solid component is no longer there for the purpose of the simulation. What I like about this is it's going to keep all of those parts actually in the top level model. If I were to go back to my model, toolbox fasteners are still there. In the static study, though, it basically just excluded those from the analysis.
Oh, nice.
All those solids are grayed out.
I've never looked at the details of exactly how that's done, but I could see, especially like in a model like this, where the relative like geometry, like size compared to the rest of the assembly, like those fasteners are pretty small. So like meshing those and trying to get like accurate data on that would be pretty bad, where it could be much more easily calculated in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point, especially like with some of the small features, like that Phillips head right there. I mean,
yeah, this is going to make your mesh a lot smaller.
Yeah, just to get it to even work. I mean, to actually run the study, you're going to put some work in to do that. So I'm really a big fan of the bolted connectors. If you're going to put those in your simulation, you get a lot of good data out of them too. Like it's going to represent them mathematically, like I said, so you can actually extract from that some of your fastener forces. If you wanted to know the shear force on that screw, for example, you can definitely do that.
And you can add like preload and stuff to it, right? Too. So there's not really a good way to do that any other way that I know of.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you take a look at the symbol there for those toolbox fasteners that got converted, there's a little axial preload here. You can see with that yellow arrow. So it automatically puts in a preload if it's a toolbox component. And I did some digging on it one time, and I found in the help documentation, it's actually based on ASME standard information for whatever size fastener that is. There's certain preload calculations it'll do.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff. I mean, if you can think about a much more complicated assembly that's got a bunch of toolbox fasteners in it, that's a big time saver right there.
Yeah, for sure. I did have I think one other thing that I really wanted to show you too, I guess, with the toolbox for everybody. So if we go back to my screen really quick. So when I was adding a component from the toolbox, I think one of my favorite things, like if you have a company-wide toolbox, and we'll talk a little bit more about sharing a toolbox in a little bit, but if you have like a piece of hardware and you have like internal like part numbering and stuff for that. So if I were to grab this hex bolt again and we just drop it in that hole, one of the first things that you'll find here after you come in and you change the length to whatever length you'd like, make sure that the size is correct. Right here, you can see that it's got a part number section. So if you're trying to track like part numbers and stuff, you can easily come in here and add your own part number. You might want to copy that description down into the description field, and then you can come in and say this is whatever part number, and we can add it, right? And then next time this is used, it's going to have that same part number, right? So easy to use. It's just so easy to share with your coworkers too.
Right? Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we probably won't have time to get into it today, but you can update that stuff in bulk too, right? If
yeah, actually
go through and
let's take a really quick look at configuring the toolbox, just because there is some really good stuff. Because if I just go ahead and right click out here, one of the things that you'll notice as soon as the toolbox pops up, the whole wizard and the toolbox are combined. I'm sure you've probably noticed that if you've ever done a SOLIDWORKS install, it says whole wizard / toolbox. So the first section was on my whole wizard. The second section is on my toolbox. And one of the first things that I do when I set up somebody on the toolbox is I come in and I turn off all the things that I'm not going to use.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, and then I might even come down into my standard and say, you know what? We've learned our lesson on using the structural members from the toolbox. I'm not even going to give people that option. Right?
I'm going to force you to use weldments now.
Yeah.
I like it.
And then there are some other advantages in here too, from an administrative standpoint, where you can set permissions, right? You can set a password for this, for how it's configured, as well as I think you mentioned earlier, like how it's actually handling the components. Is it creating as configurations inside of like the seat models, or is it actually creating new parts of these things? There's a lot of great stuff in here.
Absolutely.
The only other thing that I really wanted to show, I think, before I get back off of my screen here, is I think something people often overlook, and it's this section over on the right here, right? If I'm in a multi-user environment, right here, it's telling me that I'm not set up correctly. If this is yellow when you come over here, that's not good, right? It means that basically we're going to run into the same situation that me and Brandon ran into at the beginning of this, that we're not basing off of the same parts, we're not basing off the same database, so our configurations aren't going to be correct when we go to try to load those models.
Yep, exactly. Not too many people read through that message, but it pretty much explains it all.
Yeah.
If you're having issues with Toolbox, that's part of the reason right there, at least in my experience. Support tickets and stuff we've handled in the past, not sharing the database is going to cause all kinds of weird stuff to happen that you don't know how to explain otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate, honestly. Like, and there used to not be like a really good way to lock down which toolbox a user was looking at to guarantee that they were looking at the correct toolbox. So
yeah,
often people would be working off of their local toolbox and not even realize it.
Yep. So I guess that kind of brings us to our next point. Ideally, in a multi-user environment, you're going to want to share the toolbox, right? So what are some of the best ways to do that?
I mean, you can share it from a network drive. That's it is a method that does work, right? You can do that. However, like best practices with dealing with any SOLIDWORKS files are to be able to work on them locally, right? And so like you always wonder, like, so how do I work on files locally, but then also be able to share it with my coworkers? Like one of us is going to have to copy these things from the network, right?
Yep.
So what's the solution, Brandon?
My favorite 3 letters, PDM.
Oh, I thought it was PCB. I thought PCB was my favorite.
No, I'll let you deal with that. But, PDM, I really didn't realize how much easier you can make a lot of that stuff because, the infrastructure is there. You want to be able to put it onto a server. You want to share it with all your SOLIDWORKS users. But for the best security of the data, not corrupting it by network traffic or anything, you should be working on those files locally, right? We talk about this all the time. Toolbox files included. Put them in PDM. Local copies are taken care of. You can even set your PDM system up to where every time you log in, it's going to refresh that Toolbox folder or templates or whatever you want it to bring down. So,
yeah, one of my favorite options with the PDM too, and that is that you can mark that folder. Like if you're using a copy tree, you can say don't copy these parts, right? If you were to like kind of like a pack and go sort of function to it, like treat these parts as if they could never be copied, and that's awesome.
I just had that question come up the other day.
Yeah,
like, I don't want being my standard hardware. And they didn't happen to be using Toolbox in that case, but that's exactly what I told them. Just manage it so that they can't copy tree from that location, and you're good.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, we could talk about PDM all day.
Oh yeah,
that's not.
We do most days.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
but we're actually get to talk about SOLIDWORKS today, so it's all good.
Fun stuff.
What about, I guess one of the reactions that I've heard from people, besides like, how do I share it? Like, will the toolbox actually make things faster or slower? Right? Like,
Yeah, and I guess that really depends on what level of detail you're getting to, right? If you got an assembly with thousands of fasteners in it, it doesn't matter if it comes from Toolbox or McMaster Carr's website. It's probably going to cause some performance issues for you, right?
yeah,
So,
and I would even say, to some extent, with the McMaster Carr stuff, I do like using that. Like, I go and download components and stuff from there all the time.
mm-hmm.
The thing that I don't like about it is that they have those swept cut threads, right? And if you've ever
Yeah.
taken the assembly modeling class, you know that they're like 100 times slower than if it was just a cosmetic thread, right? It's just
Mm-hmm.
super resource intensive to do that,
Yep.
as well as the file size
Yeah.
is a lot bigger, which then if you're not using PDM or some other data management solution, leads to file corruption and all sorts of other fun stuff that goes with it. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great point on the simplification side of things that I didn't even really think about. But a lot of those files have just features in them that you don't need. That's another advantage of Toolbox is a lot of it's really just cosmetic, right?
mm-hmm. Yep. So I guess that takes us kind of into the next thing, where when I go from version to version, like, what do I need to do? Like, what's the confusion? Like, why do I get like these weird pop-up messages? Like,
I see that so many times. You get into a new version of SolidWorks and try to go pick the tool, either Toolbox or Whole Wizard, and it comes up with a message that can't access the database, right? What's up with that? We used to get a lot of calls for that. But really what it comes down to is every year when you update SolidWorks, you also need to update your Toolbox database. It's going to convert all that data to the next release version. So if I were to give any tips on this for how to manage it, I would say pay close attention to your installation manager. It's going to tell you what your current Toolbox location is. If you wanted to upgrade it, that's all system off. Or you can create a new Toolbox location. Like, I'm a great example. I've got 3 versions of SolidWorks installed on my computer right now. Each one has to have its own toolbox, right?
yep.
So pay close attention to that page. It'll tell you everything you need to know. But if you didn't happen to upgrade your toolbox, what option would you have instead, Garrett?
So there's a utility. I don't think I have it up. Let me see if I have it up. Oh, I do have it up. I'll go ahead and show you. So there's a couple of tools that you can get to that are part of your install. If you go to like your normal SolidWorks install, there's a toolbox folder in here, and then a data utilities folder. And there's 2 tools, right? If you're running on a very old version of SolidWorks and you want to maintain your toolbox and bring it up to the latest version, what you want is this guy. SolidWorks Toolbox used to use some Microsoft database file as the database that was running in the background. That was slow. Part of the reason why probably a lot of people didn't like the Toolbox was it was slow.
Mm-hmm.
There was a slow database that it was running behind. Then a few years ago, SolidWorks changed the types. Now we're running this new SolidWorks database file that's much faster, has a lot more capability. So this tool just converts it. Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
I remember when we presented on that and told people that the Access database was going away, and I had some people clap for that.
Yeah, if they understood the implications of what that did, like, yeah, it's huge. Usually the tool that people are looking for in here, if we're talking about upgrading Toolbox databases, is this one, the update browser database file. You just point this to your database and then basically say update, and it will run through, use the SolidWorks resources and update it to the latest version. There's even like a log file and stuff there if it doesn't go right. I would say if you're going to do that, maybe make a copy of a backup copy of your Toolbox before you run it, just in case something happens. it's always good to have a backup of your data before you do any updating. So
your PDM administrator side is coming out.
Yeah.
Get your backups.
Can't turn it off.
Yep.
Talked way too much about PDM today. It's all good. The other tool that's in here is a set doc props. What this does is it allows you to take Toolbox files and remove the Toolbox flag off of those.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to use that a lot. Now I haven't used that in a long time. I don't even know when the last time I got in there and used that was.
It's been a while for me too. I remember in certain cases where, people just wanted to use the Toolbox geometry, but those issues of sharing those files with other people where it's going to pull in the wrong Toolbox fastener size. If you strip that flag off of it, it's just like any other part, right? So
yep.
Can be good in certain situations, but I haven't used that one for a long time.
Yeah, and I've seen where people will say that it didn't stick. I think the biggest problem with that is if you don't actually change the file name, that it's still sort of in a way can be linked back to the database, because we'll talk about at another episode at some point, the order that things are updated, SOLIDWORKS can automatically swap out files that have the same names, right? If it's looking for something.
Good point.
So if you are doing that, save it as a different name first, then remove the property flag. So
good advice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's see what else we got here. We ready for support questions?
Yeah. So today's question is, why does my arc tool keep turning from a line into an arc? My line tool is turning into an arc, I guess.
Yeah, let's take a look at that.
What's going on with that?
So if I were to create a sketch and just come up here and grab the line tool. If I'm just sketching along and I'm not real careful about where my mouse cursor is at, maybe I'll look away for a minute, whatever it is. If I don't realize that I touched the end point of one of those lines, we used to get this question all the time. Why isn't an arc? I've got the line tool active. How do I get rid of this thing? Well, if you end up in this situation, if you're not trying to create an arc, which there are some advantages to it, if you're going to create a slot shape, before they actually put the slot shape tool in sketches for SOLIDWORKS, you could create a slot this way. Pretty slick tool, but if you want to get rid of this guy, just hit the A key on your keyboard, and it'll go right back to the line tool.
And if you hit A again, you get arc again?
Yep, we get the arc again. So.
Well, that's easy.
All kinds of fun stuff. Easy fix. And if you need to use that tool, it's actually pretty sweet.
That's awesome, man.
Well, there we have it. We covered a lot today, man.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about next time? We didn't even ask about this. I didn't even ask you about this earlier, but.
Oh, man.
I think next time I want to talk about rendering.
Yeah, rendering would be a good one.
Yeah. So we'll talk about Photo View 360, Visualize, and other things.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Visualize, and I get questions about it quite a bit, and I think most people don't know that they already have Visualize, so they can just start using it. So that should be a fun one. Well, cool. It was good chatting with you today, Garrett.
Yeah, as always, man.
Well, we'll see you guys on the next episode where we'll take a look at some rendering tool options. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode and learned a few new things about SOLIDWORKS Toolbox. So if you thought it was a fool box, hopefully you can fix some of those issues and make it work the right way for you. We'll see you next time.
Later, SOLIDWORKS nerds.